Hello and welcome back to Burt's Basics, Boxelder High School. This is Medical Anatomy Physiology. Today we are tackling the difference between glands and the membranes found in the body. So this is going to be Unit 4, Histology. We're beginning tissues, and then after this we're going to integumentary, which is the skin. So let's go ahead and look at the things you need to know first, and then we'll go from there. So these are the things that you need to know. Hold on one second. There we go. So these are the concepts that we are learning today. Today we are doing exocrine versus endocrine gland, and then these are the four membranes found in the human body. We have mucus, serous, synovial, cutaneous. Now, right away I'm giving you a huge warning. Serous, synovial, serous, synovial, serous, synovial. They sound a lot alike, and so we want to make sure we can tell them apart. So let's go ahead and start with the first one, which is exocrine versus endocrine. I'll preach it again, I'll preach it again and again and again and again. If you can take medical term, your life will be 1,000 times easier for you, because then when I throw out words like exo, endo, and crine, they all come together in one big lump. Now we know a gland. Everyone knows a gland is something that makes something and like pushes it out. So now let's compare and contrast. So let's start with the almighty endo. Endo generally means in or into. So whenever you hear the word endo, like endocytosis, we're going into the cell. Exo is the opposite. That is out of the cell. Crine is the one we probably aren't familiar with, and crine means to secrete. So in class, I always ask kids, I'm like, well, what's an exocrine gland then? And if you directly translate it, it's a gland that secretes out. And an endocrine gland is a gland that secretes in. But the key is you're missing one huge word. And so I'll trap them in class, that big word we were just talking about, and I'll say, what's an exocrine gland? They'll be like, oh, it's just like secretes outside the body like a sweat gland. So then I say, what about spit glands? Because they secrete into my mouth. Is that an endocrine gland? And they're like, yeah. The key is you're missing your key word, and your key word is blood. An exocrine gland secretes this product not into the bloodstream, where an endocrine gland secretes this product directly into the bloodstream. So let me give you a picture, an example. This is an exocrine gland on the left, okay? I know that for two reasons. Number one, this is where the product is, and it has a pipe or a duct. That is red flag number one. If I have a duct, that means I'm secreting the product where it needs to go. Sweat glands all have a duct getting the sweat out. Salivary glands all have a duct, okay? The pancreas has a duct that actually connects to the small intestine, to my duodenum. That is an exocrine gland if it's in a pipe or a duct. If we look over here, if you're an endocrine gland, you don't need a pipe. You don't need a duct. You just got to poop out whatever you're making into the extracellular fluid, and it will naturally, by diffusion, go into the bloodstream. So that's your biggest difference anatomically. If you have a duct, you're an exocrine gland. If you don't have a duct, you're more than likely an endocrine gland. Now, this is tricky because some organs are both, like the liver and the pancreas. The pancreas secretes insulin via its endocrine function, because insulin and glucagon go right into the bloodstream. But it also secretes three huge enzymes right into the small intestine, which is a pipe, not the bloodstream. So that's why the pancreas is both exo and endocrine. So when you guys look at this, remember, it's all about the blood. If I secrete into the blood, I'm endocrine. If I secrete out of the blood, I'm an exocrine. From that point, you should be fine on every gland that we talk about. So as we start skin, we're going to talk more and more about glands. Now let's go ahead and talk about the membranes found in the human body. Okay, there are four membranes found in the human body, and I wanted to start with one that I thought you'd be most comfortable with. All right, sorry, just wanted to make sure everything is working right. So I want to start with something that you're a little more familiar with, which is my mucous membrane. Any opening to the outside world will always have a lining called a membrane that secretes a substance called mucus. Now, you guys are familiar with this. You call it snot, you call it boogers, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But anytime something goes in my body or touches my body, it should always touch mucus first. So if it goes up my nose, mucus. In my mouth, mucus. Okay, up your urinary tract, mucus. Up the reproductive tract, mucus. In the stomach, mucus. Anytime something touches my body, there should be a mucous membrane coating there to protect it. So in this diagram, besides it being tiger woods, y'all, everything in white is lined with a mucous membrane. And these are the systems that have it. And they're amazing about protecting openings and prevent dehydration. So when you guys think about it, just remember, mucus rules. And it's a good thing. We like mucous membranes, except when we're sick. Okay? Second membrane we need to talk about. Now this one's a little more tricky. On this one, we have a serous membrane. Now, this is the weirdest diagram you've ever seen in the center. We're going to talk a lot about this in class, but well, not every, but most organs in the body are lined in what we call a serous membrane. It's like this hand. Picture this hand as an organ and it's touching the balloon. Now that means that there's actually not one lining that surrounds the organ, it's two. So sometimes when I get some stuff and I want to put it in the freezer, I don't want to put it in one plastic bag because I'm afraid it could get freezer burned, so I put it in two plastic bags. So if you want to think of it this way, every organ is double wrapped in two coatings. Now this is still one membrane. You can see it's still one balloon, but there's a membrane that touches the organ itself, and then a membrane way far away on this other side that's farthest away. Now, unfortunately, in anatomy, these both have names, and here's a name right here. The actual name of the serous membrane that touches the organ itself is called the visceral membrane. Now, visceral just means it touches. You have visceral membranes all over your body. Okay, the one farthest away is called the parietal membrane. So if I say visceral, touching organ, if I say parietal, farthest away from the organ, and in between them is a space, generally filled with some kind of fluid, which we call serous fluid. It's to reduce friction and rubbing and problems with other things. And so my heart expands and shrinks all day. So does my lungs. I can't have them touch anything. Think about if your heart touched your lungs like this all day. Pretty soon it would start to wear out real quick. So instead, it has this protective bubble around it. This second word tells you what organ it is. So if you notice, peri, that's a word you should know by now. Peri is around, and cardi is heart. So pericardium is around the heart. So I have a visceral pericardium. That's the membrane that goes around the heart that directly touches the heart. And then I also have a parietal pericardium, which is the one that goes furthest away. So these two go hand in hand together. We have a visceral touching the organ and parietal furthest away. Now let's go over here. Why does it say, wow, that picture's really fuzzy. I'm sorry about that. Why does that say visceral pleura? I thought it was pericardial. Well, this is the lungs. So pleur is a med-term word for ribs. So I have a rib cavity. And just like your heart, it has a double bag. It has a visceral pleura touching the lungs, and then a parietal pleura further away from the lungs, filled with serous fluid so that there is no friction. Because remember, my lungs expand and shrink all day. So when you hear serous membranes, you should think these are valuable membranes that protect organs. When you hear mucous membranes, you should think, wow, this is a cool membrane that protects us from dehydration and trapping all pathogens that enter my body. Now let's compare and contrast serous membranes with synovial. Now synovial is a little bit different, even though it sounds the same. So if we look at here, okay, here's a joint. You got your bone, you got your epiphyseal plate, you got your spongy bone, you got all these different parts of the bone you're going to learn. You got some cartilage, which serves as a nice pad. But you have a lot of motion here. Anytime you have a highly movable joint, like my fingers, okay, see how smooth those are when they move? It's because there's fluid in every highly movable joint space. And we call this membrane that goes around it the synovial membrane. And inside there, they produce a fluid. Now, be very careful here. This is not serous fluid. It is synovial fluid. So synovial fluid is the fluid around highly movable joints, shoulder, hips, knees, ankles. Serous membranes are around vital organs like your heart and your lungs and your peritoneal space. And there's lots of different serous type of membranes. Okay. So once again, let's go through them again, all three of them. Mucus protects coatings, any kind of bacteria, infection, dehydration. Serous protects organs, double-lined, visceral touching, parietal furthest away. Depending on what organ it is a secondary name after visceral and after parietal. Synovial, highly movable joints. Okay, this is where you get your popping of your knuckles and popping of your neck. Those are synovial. So whenever we have a highly movable joint, we're going to have a synovial. And the last membrane you need to know is cutaneous. Now in this video, I'm not going to talk about cutaneous too much because in cutaneous membranes, we are talking about the skin. Okay, cutaneous membrane and skin are almost synonymous. Now I have two layers here. If you've taken any class before, you know there's three. There's the epidermis, there's the dermis, and then the last one's called your subcutaneous. If you notice, it's mostly yellow because that is a lot of adipose tissue, which tends to be that's a lot of fat. So when we talk about the cutaneous, we're generally talking about the epidermis and the dermis, and it serves as a nice, thick, protective membrane to protect my body from different pathogens and to also make it watertight and water sealable. So those are my 4 membranes. So let's go through them one more time just to make sure we're all on board. Okay. Endocrine secretes into bloodstream. Exocrine secretes out of bloodstream. Mucous membranes protect me from any kind of infection and dehydration. Okay. Serous membranes protect my organs. Synovial membranes, highly movable joints. And cutaneous membrane is a fancy name for your skin. Congratulations, you just knocked out all 4 types of membranes, exo and endo. Go ahead and answer these 3 questions. The answer key's on the next page, and I hope you had a fun time on Burt's Body Basics, and I'll see you soon.